in the WDKX studio today. We start off with two doctors themselves, Dr. Rick Kittles and Dr. Kevin MacDonald. Good morning, guys. How are you doing today?
Good morning. Very well. Good morning.
Good to have you in here. A couple of things. I was just talking a bit about some of the health issues that we as African Americans tend to put on the back burner. I think we're getting up, going to work. We've got the kids on the bus right about now. We're getting ready to plan how we're going to have to deal with, as my mom used to call it, the job.
Right.
And say it with that emphasis, the job. And then somewhere third, fourth, or fifth becomes our health. And it's one of those things that it should be priority number one, wouldn't you say?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. You know, it's one of the things that we sort of take for granted. A lot of times we invest more in our hair or our car or other things instead of really paying attention and being responsible in terms of our health. So.
Dr. MacDonald, why is this one of those things that we constantly tend to just put on the back burner? I mean, you're absolutely right. The fact that we will concentrate on more things that will gratify us in the moment, but in the long term, we should be out here taking care of our health.
I think we get caught up in life. I think there's when we prioritize our health, it's often the low end of the totem pole. I think you're right. We have to push it up. It's important. It helps define our legacy, and it's important for our families.
Speaking of legacy, we were talking a little bit off air. My mother is interested in the entire family history and has gone back to North Carolina and all the family roots, and has been doing that ever since I was probably around 10 years old. And I was telling you guys about that and the importance of knowing all of the facts about our history. Why is that important, Dr. Kills? Why do we need to go all the way back?
Well, in terms of understanding your history, in particular family history and ancestry, is important because family history is a part of defining who we are or who you are as an individual in a family. It helps us shape our identity. And so for African Americans, we know very little about our very distant ancestry because of the experience with the transatlantic slave trade. And so it's been very difficult as a community to really say, I am from this ethnicity in Africa. We all claim some ancestry in the rural South. But of course we have a history before then. And I think it actually has impacted the psyche of blacks because all other groups actually have some family history, some homeland which they can identify with. But for African Americans, we're sort of in this place of claiming all of Africa.
Yeah, we claim a continent as opposed to other cultures who claim a country. What I mean, as one. How do we fix that? Because there's a personal. I often look at it from a standpoint of internally, you have to want to do these things, right. Dr. MacDonald. You have to want to go find it. How do we find or push that button to want to go uncover what's going on with our history and our lineage?
Well, I think we can't allow society to kind of define who we are. And I think so often, the social constructs of race kind of help compartmentalize who we are. And ultimately, when we think about generation after generation, it becomes kind of pervasively ingrained in the minds of individuals. So we do have to be proactive, and we have to kind of ultimately identify for our own selves our roots, so we can have better context with regard to our lives.
Both of you gentlemen, very much a part of RIT and everything that goes on in there. Talk a little bit about the importance of education going forward as well, because I think, one, you have to look back at the history and also look forward as well to what's happening and what's going on in society, and how to change what's happening in Chicago and Rochester and all the things that are really, I hate to say this, we're eliminating our own race to some extent.
Right. Well, I graduated from RIT, and so I was really interested in science and technology. And I studied biology, and then after I graduated from RIT, this goes back about '89, in the late '80s, I got my PhD at George Washington University in DC. And I really wanted to focus my studies and my research on people of African descent. I knew genetics and DNA had something to play a role in terms of our health and understanding who we are. And so that's sort of what got me excited. And I think it allows us as a community to really understand not only ourselves, but as I said, our overall health. If you go across the country, many different urban communities where there's a large number of African Americans, you find areas where we have the poorest communities and we also have the poorest health. And there are many reasons for that. And I think as a community, we really need to address those ourselves, because you can't wait for somebody else to think somebody's going to come in and improve the health for your community. This is our community. We take ownership in the community and in ourselves. So we really have to think about how, as an individual, we could use our present understanding, but also the technology to improve health. And that's where things are going right now. Right now, in terms of genomics and genetics and research on DNA, it's very fascinating. We're actually looking at some of the molecular changes in the breast that lead to breast cancer. Some of the changes in the prostate. How does our genes that we inherit from our parents interact with the environment? For instance, vitamin D, and how vitamin D plays a role in our overall health. African Americans have the lowest levels of vitamin D than any other community in the U.S. and low vitamin D levels impacts our health. And I think that those are things that we really need to think about as a community more.
And of course, Mr. MacDonald, you're Vice President of Diversity over at RIT. Let me ask you a bit about